pašu semināru. Tad sveiki, man sauc Toms Zvidriņš, Lijā pārstāvniecības vadītājs ASV, un šodien mums ir runātājs par ASV biznesa kultūru, bet pirms sākam semināru pāris lietas. Viens, ja jums ir kādi jautājumi ģirtam, tad droši rakstiet to Q&A sadaļā, nevis čatā, un tad seminārs paredzēts ir angļu valodā, apmēram 1 stundu, un es domāju, ka tad mēs varam arī sākt. Well, first of all, thanks for joining us at 7 a.m. in
Morning.
California time. A little bit about Dirt. Dirt Graudench moved to the US around 30 years ago, and he moved actually to study at the Harvard University. And then after getting his degree, he's lived and worked in cities like Boston, Dallas, and Seattle. And then about 20 years ago, ended up in Silicon Valley in California. And there he's worked at tech companies. He started his own companies. He has 2 exits under his belt. And most notable company I'd say he has worked for is Twilio, which is currently valued at about 10 billion US dollars. And then today, Dirts invests and advises tech companies and then helps on their journey. So with that, I'd like to give the word to Dirts to tell us a little bit more about how business is done in the US and give us some tips and tricks that hopefully will help you with your journey in the US. Yeah, Dirt, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Let's get started. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk, Culture and Business in the United States. So first of all, thanks, Toms, for the very kind words of introduction. I'm Geert. Like he said, I help ambitious Baltic startups to scale in the United States. And if you find anything that I say today interesting, please connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on Twitter. So the agenda for today. So the way we thought about this is basically we'll have some slides that I'm presenting now. Should take about 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll go into a Q&A session. So like Tom said, please put the questions in the Q&A section, and then we'll go through those specific questions afterwards. In the beginning, I wanted to give a very high-level overview of the culture and business and things that you should be prepared for. I know it's a very wide-ranging audience. Some people are coming for the first time. For some people, it's a repeat business. So this is really kind of tailored more towards folks coming for the first time and preparing you for a little bit of that culture shock. I'll also say, the title is Culture and Business in the United States. It's really more specifically about Silicon Valley and the things that you'll see in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. So jumping right in, welcome to America. Everything is awesome. If there is one thing, at a very high level that I wanted to get across is there's something to kind of prepare yourself for, which is this a little bit of a value shift in the American culture. So of course we have a meme. So to explain what I mean here, so here's a normal distribution of like what terms might mean in a normal situation. On the vertical axis, there's sort of the goodness of stuff, and then left to right, there's bad to good, and the normal case is things are pretty good. You have good, you have awesome, and on the left side you have it's okay or bad. So that would be kind of like the normal distribution of values. But then when it comes to America, everything is awesome. So you'll see that, people will use terms like great and fantastic. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Whereas, in Europe, people are much more direct and kind of like, if they don't like something, they're like, I don't like this. Whereas in the US, like I said, everything is awesome. Another kind of very high level tip. One of the things I struggled myself when I first came to this country is like there are all these introductions and what they're called friendly noises. People will say, "How are you? What's going on? How are you doing? What's up?" The first thing to know, they're actually not asking you to tell how you're doing and what's happening in your life. This is just purely a formality, and the only one and right answer is you're doing great. That's the answer. That's it. You're doing great. How are you? Moving on. So don't go into, well, I went to the store and my daughter's sick. No, you're doing great. That's the answer. Then getting ahead, a little bit more about kind of like Silicon Valley and just kind of high level tips. The way I'd put it is, the communication style is very direct, but when I say direct, I don't mean quite like in the European sense that, they won't tell you exactly how things are necessarily. What it means, there's little ceremony. So there's little ceremony, there's little hierarchy. That's kind of the thing to take away. People will still be very nice, right? But there's very little ceremony in interactions, in face-to-face interactions, in meetings, in emails, and we'll go through that a little bit later in this presentation. And then as you're preparing for your trip, if you're thinking about, what to bring and what to wear, this is actually a very representative and iconic picture. I don't even know where it comes from, but it's like the Apple leadership. And the things to kind of notice here, personal space. Notice you could park a small European car in between each of these people. Very broad stance, people taking up a lot of space. So that is, truly a cultural thing here. If you go to Starbucks, people line up and they'll have like 2 meters between them. In terms of clothing, it is casual, but make no mistake, these jeans are probably $500 and the shoes are probably $1,000. So it's casual, but it's not so casual either. So it is a relaxed style. Now, again, given that this is an official delegation, I'm sure you can't ever go wrong with a nice suit. So I'm sure that's great. But you also probably want to bring something lighter and more casual as well. So these are the type of characters you can expect to meet in Silicon Valley. So then getting to business, one of the first things that I think we should really kind of highlight is this notion of elevator pitch. So elevator pitch, what does it mean? It means a quick, succinct introduction that you could kind of deliver in the time it takes to ride in an elevator from ground floor to wherever you're going. So short and succinct. You mentioned who you are. Hi, I'm Geertz. What do you do? I build and run engineering teams in Silicon Valley. Why does it matter to them? 3 startups, 2 exits. Call to action. Link up with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and so forth. So that would be kind of the thing to note, and I encourage everybody to think about what is your elevator pitch, how do you kind of introduce yourself, and practice it with folks, and hopefully we'll have great results when you're here. So that's elevator pitch. Think about it. Then the next one, small talk, very interesting topic. At the beginning of meetings and kind of like in all these networking scenarios, there's a few minutes in the beginning where people are just kind of hanging around. They're asking these low-level, non-controversial topics. And so you kind of really need to read the room in terms of what are the things you can, ask to establish some rapport, right? And so, the typical ones are where are you from, where do you go to school, etc. In our case, being, part of this delegation, knowing what's going on, for example, Salesforce, Dreamforce is going to be in town. Maybe hey, are you going to go to Dreamforce? Do you know who's going to be the concert? Who's going to do the big concert for Salesforce? So, things like that. Traffic. People always love to complain about traffic. Other things like that. Hobbies. If somebody's likely to be a parent, children, school. Just various ways you can use it, to in build rapport and learn something about the people that you're about to talk to. So something again to kind of have in mind as you're preparing for a trip. Now, getting communications, like I said, very short and to the point, and very low on ceremony. So here's example I found on the internet from Steve Jobs, so one of the industry leaders. And I will say this is actually even shorter and more to the point than most. So usually it'll be like either hi or hi Eric or something like that. But also definitely note that this is no dear Mr. something. There's no lengthy introductory paragraphs. Don't do that. I hope this email finds you well. It never does. So just very short, right to the point. Call to action also very, very important in kind of context, in getting introductions, setting up meetings. You should always have in mind what is the next thing that you're going for. So if you're just meeting somebody, you probably want to get a follow-up meeting or an intro meeting set up, or just even get connected to them. If you're in the first meeting, you want to get the second meeting. If you're in the second meeting, you want to get the third. So, and just, spell it right out. People don't have time to read these things. They just glance at it for 2 seconds and either act on it, or it just goes into the sort of things that don't get addressed. So make it easy for people to respond. Some things very simple, the time and date formats. What I have here is January 12th. It's not the 1st of December. That's what it is. So it's month, day, year. And so using those appropriate formats is actually is great. And likewise, using some other format, you'll kind of just sort of advertising that you're not from here. So there's no military time. It's AM, PM. The dollar sign goes before the number. We use commas to separate thousands, etc. Very important, actually, in the United States, setting up meetings, arranging for things, time zones. Not everybody you're going to meet is from San Francisco. Not everybody's in the Pacific time zone. And so as you're, discussing time, setting up meetings, etc., always keep in mind where they are, where you are. Ideally, when you're proposing something, you're proposing it in their local time zone, right? So don't make them do the time math of, oh, can we meet at this time, Central European time? Like that, it just creates friction. In terms of referring to them, this is actually kind of important. Either PTET, so Pacific Time Eastern Time, or Pacific Eastern, spell it out. There is, there's like a 3-letter variations of standard or daylight savings time, PSD, PDT. What I'm seeing lately, and that's like the special insight. People just like really shorten it. Again, no ceremony. PTET. That's it. That's for Pacific Time, Eastern Time. So a little bit more about communication. So channels, and again, there's things that are evolving, but as generations progress, uh, voice calls and voicemails increasingly less and less used unless they are prearranged. So, for example, my personal daily life, I do not answer voice calls unless it is actually a scheduled call and I know who the caller is. Um, so, for example, when Tom's called, I picked it up because it said Tom Seed and she's calling. Other than that, there's no way you can get through. So async is preferred over sync. So async being text, chat, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, email, all of those async modes of communication, definitely preferred. Definitely, if you're going to have a meaningful conversation, schedule it ahead of time, prearrange it. If you are doing a voice call and somebody's not at the other end, you do need to be prepared to leave a voicemail. And so what you leave there is, "Hi, I'm Geertz. Call me back. This is my number." Um, Things like that, and maybe again a short call to action, like, "What is this about? What are we trying to achieve?" And then follow ups, ideally same day or next. So hot, hot off the press, as it were. It's important because that's when things are still fresh in people's memories. We're dealing with very busy people. They have a lot of stuff going on, and so if you wait 3 days, so much has happened between when you met them and what you're now following up on. They've probably forgotten all the context about what happened, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's why timeliness is important. And of course, remind them, we met in this context. I'd like to do this. And again, specific call to action. Let's set up a meeting. Let's have a demo, et cetera, et cetera. So specific calls to action. So that is the end of my prepared remarks. Again, it's a very broad topic, right? And so these are very, very high level, probably, maybe news to some, maybe not to others. That's why I kind of did a quick general summary and introduction. Thank you, everybody. And then we'll go to Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Geert. One thing I was thinking about, you talked about the optimism and that everything is always awesome. How do you think the Americans perceive when someone is like critiquing or being a little bit maybe negative? What would be like what would they be thinking in their minds?
It doesn't really help. Um, there's no upside to being negative, I think. So, again, without further context, I think that's kind of a hard question, very general question to answer. But yeah, I mean, I would kind of avoid controversial topics with, like, highly negative connotations and things like that. Um, I
Okay,
don't know where
and
we're going with that particular one, but
yeah, no,
yeah,
no,
it just generally doesn't help anybody to be a sour person, right?
yep. I see. Another questions about politics and politics in within small talk. Is that
That's a good one. That's a very good one. Uh, I thought about adding a slide in here. I would avoid all the ticks, and when I say ticks, is like geopolitics, gender politics, identity politics, uh, those kinds of things. That, unless somebody else brings them up, like there's probably no reason to go there, because like you don't know who you're talking to, you don't know what their stance is. And so you can just there's a lot of downside. There's very little potential upside. So I wouldn't go like, this is not a place to espouse, certain positions or whatever. Like you're not trying to commit. You're probably here to meet people, establish relationships, establish rapport, build a lasting business, and all and so forth. So it's probably, again, this is probably not helpful, I would say.
Mhm. I see another question in the chat as well. How about jokes and responsiveness to jokes and ability to joke? And maybe there's like some things you should and shouldn't joke about.
Absolutely. So that's it. It can be a really great way to break ice, um, to build rapport. It it's possible, but you really need to know what you're doing. Again, because like it can really backfire, and there's certainly topics again relating to all the ticks, right? That you can just find yourself in hot water. So if you're for example, there's like this category of jokes called dad jokes, right? They're sort of very benign and kind of silly. So that's probably fine, but something again related to politics, geopolitics, gender politics, identity politics, that can be tricky. And so on that one, as with all the things, I would say, right, you have to really read the room and know who it is. There is a thing about jokes that it can communicate kind of like, hey, we're the same, uh we touched a slightly controversial topic, but we both feel the same way, and it's great. But again, unless you know that that's the case, that might backfire for you. So when done sort of like professionally, meaning with by somebody who knows what they're doing, jokes can be fantastic. Um, but it's an art, and so unless you really know what you're doing, that's you have to be careful.
Mhm. Another question is about email. What would be the most typical call to action in email? Is that always you're trying to arrange a meeting or a call, or are you actually like trying to do business over email?
I would say that's very context specific. So basically, my point is not so much as, not so much about what the call to action is, but more that you should know what the call to action is, right? What is it that you're trying to get out of this interaction? And so, be so clear and transparent about like this is what we're trying to do here, without being sort of flowery and a kind of in a roundabout and circumspect. And um, you know if it is a meeting you're trying to set up, and like, I would like to set up a meeting, here's some times, what times work for you. um, if you're trying to advance some deal, it's either can we set up a demo, or would you whatever, whatever else you might want to do, right? So it's about the point is really about the clarity of what the next desired step is, rather than what specific step that might be, because the specific steps would be uh, very, very context specific.
I see another question is about concerns about Latvia potentially or the Baltics being too close to the Russia and like the geopolitical side of it. Is that something
Mm.
Americans would think about, and are there any tricks to mitigate that risk?
I see. Well, I'll start here. and this may be different experience for folks coming to this delegation because they're meeting with people who know they're meeting with people from Europe, from Latvia, etc. So they probably they know their craft, they've done some background research and learning, and they kind of know what it is, right? But in general, my experience, in these years in the US has been that either people don't know anything at all, is like, what's Latvia? Or they have some sort of personal connection, meaning, oh, my neighbor was Latvian, or my doctor, my lawyer is Latvian, and then they have some kind of a understanding of, okay, what it is, where it is, what's going on. So that's been my observation. In terms of Latvia's sort of proximity and where it is proximity to Russia, I think people are reasonably well aware, where how Latvia is different from Russia. It's part of NATO. The the freedom fight in the 90s. That may be just sort of my own bubble, the people that I interact with, but like people are generally aware, at least in my little bubble, that we're sort of like the last bastion of democracy before Russia, rather than something else. So, if anything, I think the framing would be about, hey, we're here defending freedom, democracy, etc., rather than, again, something else.
Yeah.
And
That
so
talking about
I will
politics,
say
right?
this is now getting into real geopolitics, and so probably you're
That's one of the
better
ticks you said not to talk
versed
about. But yeah, no, it's a good question to know.
at handling these kind
Um,
of questions.
One other question we have, you've lived in several cities in the US, and our business trip is gonna go through Houston, San Francisco, and Denver, and
Mhm.
some companies are only participating in one city, but some are in maybe two, maybe even three. What are there any like business cultures? And you've lived in Dallas in Texas. Are there any business culture differences or culture differences in general? Because I think it's a relatively big country.
Absolutely. So there's definitely cultural differences, right? Every city has its own character. How much that translates into business culture, um, probably a little, perhaps like in dress style and things like that. Um, I would expect the biggest difference to be maybe with between Houston and the other cities. Denver, not so sure. It's like it's pretty big, big and diverse city. Um, I don't know that they're different enough to call something specific out. I think the all these communication kind of maxims apply. One thing, that there is, for example, I'll say there is this notion of traditional Southern hospitality and all of those things. So people might be uh, kind of more friendly in Houston, but remains to be seen. Let's see
Uh,
how your experience goes.
Another question about elevator pitches.
Mhm.
When so you mentioned there are few parts in that, and one of the parts is why it matters to them. Uh,
Absolutely.
why it's important, like what's the importance of it, and maybe what would be like some examples.
Mhm. Um, well, I'll just number one, I'll go back to my own, right? So I am Gert. I help Baltic startups scale in the US. if you're a Baltic startup, that's probably relevant to you, right? The other thing I would say there is the importance is really in not so much enumerating what you do, but highlighting what the outcomes, what the results are, right? So, for example, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, instead of, hi, I'm Torms, I take meetings, right? Like I advance the cause of Latvia in the US, right? It's the outcome that's the important part, um, rather than how it gets done. Those are kind of that's the main bit.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about like the help part, because your business is probably helping and solving some kind of problem, and
Mhm.
that could be one of those. Um, Another question is, are Americans delivering empty promises? And what is the hint to look for to understand the if the American partner is looking for a solid partnership? And I think this circles back to your slide about everything is awesome and no one's ever gonna tell you that,
Right.
that maybe your business is not as good as you think. Instead, they will say, "That sounds great. We should do business." And then maybe after that, nothing moves.
Right. So that kind of a question answer sequence gets more into literally like actual business coaching, right? But um, I would say so. Yes, everybody is superlative, right? So I mean, obviously, you'll get sold, right? You'll get told things. And so I would say, it's just it is hard to kind of suss it out in the first interaction, but basically, as you build a relationship, you just kind of you listen to the words, but you watch the actions, right? And you watch the results and do your due diligence, get references, talk to their customers, find out uh, know your customer, know your business partners, do your research. That's just regular part of business. Um, so I guess the thing to kind of take away from that is yes, things will be presented in the best possible way, and that's just how it is.
How important is the price and quality, and then maybe the relationship compared in a business offer?
Super context dependent. So like I said in the beginning, it's kind of hard to give general advice about very broad set of topics. There's industries that are where price is the main kind of dimension of competition, and there's some where relationship matters a little bit more. Um, that's one way to look at it, right? If you're dealing in a commodity and the commodity has a going price, then that's just the price. Um, so yeah, it's hard to answer like in a very broad general question in in any specific way. I will say that of course it is a business oriented culture. In business, costs, profits matter. These days, specifically the last, 3 years, the high interest rate regime, the focus on pretty much every company's radar is profitability, right? Controlling costs, all of that. So yes, prices, obviously important. from uh, that angle as well. I mean, that's just additional context I can bring to this. That yes, people are cost conscious these days. Budgets are tight. People are trying to be profitable. So yes, prices definitely an important aspect of business decisions. Quality, of course, also is a factor.
Mhm. Another question is, did you mentioned they prefer casual outfits? This
Mhm.
seems to be a more official delegation, and do you think a suit will be more off-putting for a startup founder and basically more like a general dress code question?
Mhm. Um, well, so like I said, this is an official delegation. That's number one. You can never go wrong in a nice suit, right? That's another one. What I would say is probably bring a variety of options and kind of change things up over depending on the city, depending on the context. If you're in, if you're meeting with some tech founders in the valley, maybe wear something more casual. If it's an official function with representatives, officials, you wear a suit. Um, so that would be my answer.
Yeah, when I
But
first
definitely bring the suit, right? For sure. Like that's
yes, yes, exactly. And I can give a quick comment. When I first moved to San Francisco, they I went to some meetings in a suit, and someone told me, well, in Silicon Valley, the founders wear t-shirts and hoodies, and then the investors wear button-down shirts and blazers, and the full suit is only that means you're either in government or you're someone's driver. So, so after that, I was like,
yeah.
okay, I have to like be more conscious about it. But my
Well,
comment
and
for the
also
delegation, we will
right.
have two events where a suit would be probably the best. And other than that, I'd say typically would be button-down shirt, jeans, and could be a vest, which is very typical here, or like a blazer, and you would be fine in most. I would not recommend too informal, because even investors they want to see that you're ready to do business, and oftentimes sell your business and product to larger companies that are um good. Let me see. Do we have any
I wanted to kind
questions?
of add to that somebody
Mhm.
asked about differences between Silicon Valley and the rest of the country. That's probably one area where a suit is way more acceptable in Houston and Denver, I would imagine, than in San Francisco, for example. So that's an additional nugget there.
Yeah, we're running out of questions, which is great, and but there's also been enough interest, I think. But there is one really good question. What is the tipping culture in the US, and specifically maybe
Insane.
in San Francisco, Houston, and Denver? And I think it's very important because I know some cases where it wasn't that good.
Yes, that is a fantastic question. Thank you, whoever that asked that one. It is definitely an area where there's a big difference culturally between Europe and the US. In the United States, people, self-admittedly, it's getting out of hand in the sense that for example, you'll go to a kiosk, a coffee shop, some place like that, where it's just you don't get service per se, right? You give them money, they give you something, and the terminal will automatically ask you for a tip. And so there's a big controversy internally in the country, as to how acceptable that is and who does what. But generally, I'll just kind of step back from that because like this is a hot topic. 20% is a good tip. Just kind of going. 18 is good. and so forth. Again, there's regional variations as well. If you're where it matters, I would say, is like if you're taking clients out for dinner, if you're taking prospects out for dinner, you probably should tip, right? It's it's just kind of expected. You're being a good host, etc. If it's a sit down dinner, etc. Um, some of these other places, the coffee shop or the kiosk where you bought, I don't know, batteries or something, and then it's asking you for 20% tip. It's up to you. Like you really don't have to. That's not for service per se, right? You just made a sale. So that's a kind of nuance there. But tips are definitely expected. They're appreciated. They're part of the culture, especially in the food service industry. Hotels will definitely appreciate it. They're for housekeeping staff when you're checking out, for example. Places like that. Porters, in the hotel and they're taking your bags up, all of that kind of stuff. People do expect, they do appreciate tips, drivers, etc. Um, as opposed to Europe, where that's my understanding is like it's not expected, and people may get even offended if you try to tip them and stuff like that. Here, it's definitely part of the culture, for better or for worse. Like we have our own internal discussions about it, of course, but yeah, so 18-20%, especially food, hospitality industry, definitely expected, appreciated, and a good thing to do. And conversely, like if you don't, then again, it's like, well, are you what's going on, right? So I've there's stories there. But
Yeah.
excellent question too.
Okay, yeah,
To
I'll
end
put it
on.
in a different way. Would you ever go to a casual lunch place where you sit down and pay maybe $10 to $20? And would you ever not tip?
Probably not. So in a like actual in a sit down context, I don't think I've ever not
It's almost
tipped, right? Where
I'm
somebody's
just trying to
bringing you
make a
stuff.
point that
Yeah.
yeah, it's almost like a requirement.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Um, Good. And in a casual lunch place, what will be the tip? Is that like 15% or still the 18-20 that you mentioned? If it's just, everyday lunch.
I think it's all right. Like, that gets down to the personal preference. I mean, and they also have like the options of the various amounts and stuff like that. So it's again, you'll see it's built into the culture, it's built into the point of sale terminal and all that kind of stuff. I would say it's more important that you do tip rather than whether it's 15 or 18%. Um, that's up to you.
This, yeah, this was a great example of Dirk politely saying that he's a better tipper than I am. But with that, I think we've addressed all the questions. If you have any other, I'll give you one more minute to type them in. From my side, I could give a quick update. We will have the group is very big that's coming to San Francisco and also other cities. So we will have a few two or parallel programs, and you will all get these programs in the next couple of days. Those will be the updated final versions. Then I hope everyone has really applied for the ESTAS and received some kind of answer. We will have a little bit of like a small survey right after this call. So if you have time, please do that. And then yeah, if there is no other and then I think there was one other question when some of the places will have limited spots. There is no application. The way these companies are chosen, we send the list to the companies that we're meeting, let's say Google or Meta, and then they basically pick the companies that best suit the meeting and the topic. Um, and then yeah, with that, I think if there's no other questions, I will say a big thank you to Dirts. I will uh, hope you guys have some time to work on your elevator pitch, and we will see you soon.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. And connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter, send me an email. Cheers.